Okay guys, so you have a handout on this, but to save a little time, we're going to kind of talk through here on the video and then have you guys come in and see me if you have questions versus spending our class time going over kind of basic vocab and anatomy here. So what this video is going to cover is the anatomy of a whole muscle, and we're going to work our way down all the way into the anatomy of a muscle fiber, which are, if you'll remember, that's our word for a muscle cell. Muscle fiber equals a muscle cell. Okay, so to start off, we're going to kind of follow the same order that you guys had in your packet, but starting off with it, what you would have covering the entire body. So if we went in and we zoomed in this guy's forearm here, the entire thing would be covered with a white sheet. You wouldn't be able to see these individual muscles or the strings here. That would all be hidden and completely covered by a complete white sheet, and that's called the superficial fascia. So that's the first term on your sheet. And that's the stuff you had to rip off to get down to the different layers of the muscles during the muscle dissection in the cats. Okay? Beneath that, each individual muscle, so if you zoom in on this, remember this is the extensor group on this side, right? These are all the extensors. Okay? The extensor group, each of those individual muscles would be surrounded by another layer just called the general fascia. And all it is a white connective tissue that surrounds the muscle. It kind of bundles it all together and holds it all together. And that's the layer that we would see first. Okay. At the end, that fascia forms tendons. So it's the same white stuff that forms at the end. And you saw a lot of those during the lab. So if you got to the end of this muscle here, it would almost be tapered down and then connected down to the bones. And remember, these are the extensors, so they go into the carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges, and they would extend the wrist and fingers back in that direction. Okay. If you go in underneath that, you then have another layer of connective tissue that surrounds each muscle, and that's called the epimysium, right up here. Okay. And it's just, again, it's white fibrous connective tissue that surrounds the whole outside. But it also goes inside, so it's not just around the outside, but it goes inside here, and it's going to separate each muscle into these little bundles of muscle fibers called fascicles. Okay, so let's see if I can find that word for you here. So a fascicle is a bundle of muscle cells. So this right here is, if we took this little chunk right here and zoomed it over to that. Okay, so the epimysium not only covers the outside of the muscle all the way around here, but it goes inside, and all that little white space here, all this space around, that's all epimysium as well, and epimysium there, and epimysium there around each fascicle, a bundle of muscle cells. Okay. If we keep going in, you'll find another layer of connective tissue called the endomysium, okay? And the endomysium takes this fascicle, so this is a bundle of muscle cells, and it separates them. So each one of these, you'll notice right here, muscle fiber, remember that's a muscle cell. So this is one muscle cell, and completely surrounding it is the endomysium. So it keeps the individual muscle cells from being held together. And that's important. You're going to see that not every muscle fiber contracts on a contraction. Sometimes when we're picking up something light, we might only need this muscle fiber and this muscle fiber to contract, and the rest of them need to kind of just be able to hang loose beside it, and they can't be all completely connected. They're actually separated by that endomysium. All right. If we keep going in, okay, we're going to zoom in on one of these muscle fibers. So you'll see here, this was the whole muscle cell right here. Here's the whole muscle, okay, and then this was one fascicle that we zoomed in on, and then this is one cell or one muscle fiber that we're looking at here. We're going to go forward and look at that in this picture right here. So this is one muscle fiber, okay? So this is a fiber right here, okay? So muscle fiber anatomy. So you'll see that section in your sheet. We're moving down to where it says muscle fiber anatomy, okay? And the big long tubes, and there's some vocab that we want to know along with that, okay? First one, sarcolemma, just a big fancy word for the cell membrane, okay? Sarco is a prefix that kind of means meat or flesh. So that's kind of where you get that word. That is going to pop up a bunch in here. Okay, so it's the muscle fiber cell membrane. So they call it the sarcolemma. Inside there would be sarcoplasm, which is just the cytoplasm of muscle fiber. Really easy. But then the first part that's really important is this myofibril. So see, notice how that this one cell actually has all these different little tubes. There's one here, and there's one here, and there's one here, and there's one here. Let me get rid of some of that ink. Each of those is called a myofibril. Okay, and inside the myofibril, is where you're going to find the two proteins called actin and myosin, and those guys are the important part. That's what we're going to talk about in terms of muscle contraction that we'll be going over. So in here, these are the thick filaments. See the purple inside here that the myosin's pointing at? So there's some purple right there, and then there's this red strings in there. Those strings, the actin and myosin, are the strings where muscle contraction actually takes place. Okay. The only other anatomy that's really important in here, guys, you got to see the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and that's all the stuff that's in blue here. So you see sarcoplasmic reticulum. So that's all this blue stuff here. Okay. And that's kind of like a special endoplasmic reticulum, but what's important about it is that it's filled with calcium. Okay, so underline that on your sheet, guys. That's where we store calcium. You're going to see calcium is what actually makes muscle contract. You need calcium and you need ATP. Those two things are what's important in muscle contracting. Okay, and then the last thing that you really need to see out of this muscle fiber anatomy is called the T-tubes, or transverse tubules. They're kind of abbreviated in here. And they're these lines, and they're kind of hard to point to. So see how there's a hole right here, and there's a hole right there, and a hole right there? Those are actually tunnels that go like this. See this little yellow channel that goes in here and goes down and around? And they're wrapped around each of these myofibrils, and they interact with the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So what's going to happen, big preview of our muscle contraction, is we're going to get an electrical impulse, right, an electrical wave, right, that starts here, and it's going to travel over the surface. You get electrical wave, there's the electrical wave, but it's also going to shoot in through those T-tubes, and that's going to cause all this sarcoplasmic reticulum here to release that calcium stored in it. And the calcium is what's really, really, really important for the muscle contraction, and that's what we're looking at. All right, so the last thing that's on that little handout is two vocab words. The first is called neuromuscular junction, which is a really easy concept, guys. What it refers to is the spot where the neuron meets the muscle. Okay, so this is a synapse, right? So if we had that muscle fiber, right, big long tube, prepare to be wowed by my skills. Okay, it's got all those little tunnels inside there. There would be a motor neuron coming down here with little branches. Remember, that would be the axon end, right? So the signal would come down, the impulse would come down from the brain, and it would release neurotransmitters into this gap, right? And that's called the neuromuscular junction. And those neurotransmitters will cause it to reach threshold and start the whole muscle contraction. So the spot where the neuron meets the muscle is called the neuromuscular junction. The second concept here is this motor unit. And a motor unit, what it's talking about is one motor neuron. So here's one motor neuron and all the muscle fibers that it controls. So let me actually get rid of a couple things here. Okay, so let me draw in one motor neuron. So here comes one motor neuron. Remember, at the end they split. The axon tends to split, and each of these branches might go to an individual muscle fiber. So here might be here's one cell that's being controlled. Here's another cell that's being controlled by this one. So they actually connect to different muscle fibers as you go through there. So that's kind of the idea. Like this one right here, this muscle fiber, or this motor neuron connects here. That's a neuromuscular junction, makes it contract. This one comes in here and makes that one contract, and it splits, and this one makes this one contract, and this one will go to another muscle fiber. So as a whole, if an impulse comes down, if we send an impulse down right here, here comes the impulse, all of these muscle fibers are going to receive the stimulus, and they're all going to be interacted with by that one neuron. So we call this as a group. All of this is called one motor unit. It's a neuron, one neuron, and all of the muscle fibers or muscle cells that it controls. All right, so that's our brief introduction to muscle anatomy and muscle fiber anatomy. That will save us a bunch of time in class, and hopefully that helps you. See you soon.